a dream this afternoon that my four little children will not come up in the same young days that I came up within, but they will be judged on the basis of the content of their character, not the color of their skin. I have a dream this afternoon that the brotherhood of man will become a reality in this day. With this faith, I will go out with you and transform dark yesterdays into bright tomorrows. With this faith, we will be able to achieve this new day.
My name is Sabu. I've been coming to Timberlake for past 5 years.
I've been in groups for about a year.
We started to come to Timberlake after moving here from Texas and didn't know anybody.
About 9 years, I was a stay-at-home dad, and I wanted some more connection with the people that have similar mindset as myself.
I realized, every season of my life when I've been too busy and plugged into other things, my Christian faith has always sort of become stagnant and just sort of hit a dead end.
I found I was a Christian of convenience, and I kind of reached out to him when I needed help. I felt like I needed to be engaged as a part of the community.
I was needing friendship and community and people that I could ask questions to and be real with about the struggles of being a mom and the joys of being a mom.
It was really nice to meet some friendly folks and to be able to recognize people on Sundays.
It's hard for me to make connections and friends because I'm an introvert, and so it was a great way for me to connect and not feel like a visitor.
Sharing in conversation, laughter, tears, or stories.
That was something which came to me when I needed it the most, so I'm very thankful to the Timberlake community as well.
It feels like Timberlake's starting to become more like home because I can walk around and actually have a few people to say hi to that know who I am.
I found encouragement.
I found support.
I found community.
I found connection in a group.
I found meaning in a group.
I found renewal.
I found friendship.
I found community.
I found connection in a group.
Good morning. Guys, some of my best friends in the world are people that I met in a group. And so if you've never been in a group before, maybe you've been in a group 45 times before, this is a great season. Get signed up, renew your commitment to meeting people around here. Who knows, you might meet a future spouse, you could meet a future friend, and you could meet a future stalker. So you're taking a risk, but it's worth the risk, right? Thanks for being here this week. I seriously, because this is my first Arctic cold that I've experienced in Seattle, I wondered who's gonna show up? And it is cold, right? Even for a Wisconsin boy, it is cold, colder than a mother-in-law's kiss. It is cold, but you are here, and you took the time, man. So last week, we launched a teaching series called Ready or Not, and it's a series all about change. And the whole premise of this series is that we have to learn how to navigate change, because whether we're ready for it or not, change is coming. It's just a part of life. Now, if you were handed a outline on your way in, you can take that out and follow along with today's talk. You can pull out the Timberlake Church app and go onto that app. Right at the bottom, you can click on the word Connect, and then it's kind of like a maze. You click on Connect, and then Weekend Resources pulls up, and then you got to click on that, but you can follow along. But here's the deal. Last week's message, we talked about how there are different types of changes that you and I experience in this life. Some changes are very slow, and they happen at a pace at which you can see it unfolding. Other changes, they are thrust on you, right? They're just forced on you. It's a crisis type of change. So some changes we get to initiate, other changes we have no control over. Regardless of what type of change that we are experiencing and going through, change creates issues that can cause us to be overwhelmed or stressed out. Right? Because there's a lot of unknown that comes with change. There's a lot of mystery with change. That being said, there are some things that are predictable. Now, in 1969, CBS started broadcasting a cartoon that has become one of the most popular animated series of all time. Any Scooby-Doo fans here? Yeah, 4 of you. All right, we're together in this, right? Here's the deal. If you've never seen an episode of Scooby-Doo, that's okay, because I'm gonna give you a summary of the episode, and just know every episode is pretty much the same, right? Every episode involves 4 teenagers and their talking dog, right? And the 4 teenagers are Fred and Daphne and Velma and Shaggy. By the way, does anybody know Shaggy's real name? Norville. Yeah, someone had it. Norville. Shaggy is his nickname. Don't say you didn't learn anything today. It may be the only thing you take away with you, but then you have Scooby, right? There you go. So every episode is a mystery, but the mystery unfolds in a very predictable way. Usually what happens is the gang is out for a ride in their 1968 Chevy sport van called the Mystery Machine, right? And this gang of teenagers known as Mystery Incorporated, they happen to be driving out in the middle of nowhere. It's dark outside, and they run over a nail, and their tire goes flat. Shocker. Surprise. What? They're having vehicle issues out in the middle of nowhere, and they can't change the tire, so now they got to go look for help. And the only place in all around them is an isolated house that happens to be haunted. Yeah. Every episode, right? So to find help, they split up and go in different directions. You got Shaggy and Scooby. They go off in one direction. In fact, let's just pull up a picture of Shaggy. I want to point out something. Does it not look like he was having a few edible Scooby snacks? Like all the time, you're like, what is this guy on? And then you've got Velma. She trips at some point and loses her glasses. Yeah, and then for the rest of the episode, she just kind of find her way around. Fred and Daphne, they always go off together. God only knows what's happening there, right? But sure enough, the end of every episode, it seems like inadvertently it's Scooby and Shaggy who end up capturing this ghost or this monster. They rip off the mask and discover it's really not a ghost. It's really not a monster. It is Old Man Withers from the amusement park down the street. And he says, I would have gotten away with it if it weren't for you meddling kids. Yeah. Every episode is a mystery, but it's a predictable mystery. It is the same show over and over and over. It's just packaged differently every time. And it's important for us to know this because in the midst of change, in the midst of the unknowns that come with change, in the midst of the mystery of change, there are some things that are predictable. 3,000 years ago, King Solomon of Israel makes this observation. He says, history merely repeats itself. It has all been done before. Nothing under the sun is truly new. So in this world that keeps changing and evolving and transforming, one of the things that's incredibly predictable, like one of the patterns we see repeated over and over and over, is in the midst of change, we have this tendency to make unwise or destructive decisions that often end up complicating our lives rather than simplifying them. It's very, very common, right? During seasons of change, and we're just stressed, we're overwhelmed, we've got a lot going on because of the fear of the unknown, because of the pressure we're under, there's this tendency to be driven by our emotions. And consequently, we end up screwing up our lives. Now, I want to talk about this as it relates to change that we initiate. Obviously, there's change that's thrust on us, but the change that we initiate. We got vision, we got dreams. Why is it we end up screwing up our lives when we're the ones trying to make things happen? To understand that, we have to remind ourselves that as followers of Jesus, we believe every human being is made in the image of God. Right? That means we're not the same as animals, we're not the same as insects, we're not the same as machines, robots. We are made in the image of God. And because we're made in the image of God, it doesn't mean we are God, it just means that we reflect God in multiple ways. So like God, we're intellectual. We can think and reason and solve problems. We're relational, we can give and receive real love. We have a moral consciousness, which means we can discern right from wrong. So, we're human beings, we're made in the image of God, and we reflect God. Well, one of the ways that we reflect God is that God's a creator, and we have the ability to create. We have the ability to dream, to envision things, and we see this all throughout the greater Seattle area. Right? This is amazing how many things that we come up with and invent and create, and it's just part of being made in God's image. We have an idea, and we bring it to life. And because we are made in God's image, it's natural, it's normal to want to initiate change. It's normal to want to set goals and dream. So you look into 2024 and say, here are the things I want to accomplish. That's normal. There's nothing wrong with that. However, if we're not careful, we're going to be so driven in trying to implement change, we're going to be so driven in trying to create things, We're gonna be so driven in trying to build and accomplish things that we will, if we're not careful, end up shipwrecking our lives in the process. So if you miss everything else I'm gonna say today, I want you to take this home with you. It is always a mistake to determine what we want to do with our lives, what we want to accomplish, what we want to accumulate, what we want to build. It's always a mistake to determine what we want to do before determining who we want to be. And the reason it's a mistake is because eventually, not this week, not necessarily this month or even this year, but eventually who we are on the inside will make its way out. It's gonna make its way out in our accomplishments. It's gonna make its way out in our careers. It's gonna make its way out in our marriages, in our parenting. It's gonna make its way out in our friendships. And so before we determine what we wanna do in the coming months, the things we wanna accomplish, what we wanna accumulate, we first need to determine who we wanna be. And it shouldn't be difficult for any of us, really, to understand the urgency behind this. Because, come on, every single week, isn't it true? There's the name of some politician in the headlines, some faith leader, some really, really talented musician, some superstar, some athlete, some successful business owner, who you're watching the headline and you're like, they spent their entire life getting to that position of power and influence, but because of a moral or ethical risk that they took, they literally are losing it all. Their whole life is spiraling out of control. And it drives us crazy because we're thinking, oh dear God, if I was married to her, I would not have screwed that up, right? If I had that much power, if I had that much influence, come on, if I had made that many successful albums, if I'd been in that many films, if I had that much money, if I had that much talent, I promise you, I would never have taken the risk that they took. I would have been way more careful. And it doesn't make sense to us. Why would they risk it all for something they never really even needed? But the answer is fairly simple. It's because all of us live in this world that pressures us in regard to what we're accumulating and achieving and accomplishing. And so it's easy to be driven by bigger and more and better and just go, go, go without pausing to consider who we want to be. But come on, isn't this true? Every bit of marketing, every bit of social media, every song, every movie that's ever been produced, all the classes taught in colleges and in universities, come on, all of that is about our outside world and what we can achieve and what we can accomplish. Who are you dating? Who are you married to? Where are your kids gonna go to college? What do you do for a job? How much money do you make? Who do you know? Where do you live? What talents do you have? What position do you hold? Every day, we are being pressured in regard to what our outside world looks like. Nobody is pressuring us on who we're becoming on the inside. And this is why King Solomon of Israel warns his readers. He says, guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. Who you are is way more important than what you become and what you accomplish. It's always a mistake to determine what we want to do before first determining who we want to be. We think about what we want to be, right? We want to be this success. Who do you want to be? Who you are on the inside will eventually make its way on the outside. And it's one of the most sobering thoughts in the world when you think about it, right? Because our talents and our passions and our intelligence and our connections, right? Who we know, all of that stuff, it has the potential, the opportunities that come our way, they have the potential to help us accomplish some pretty amazing things. But they also have the potential to carry us way past what our character can sustain. So let me put it this way. Charisma or competency will not compensate for the lack of character. You want to have charisma, right? You want to walk in a room, everybody love you, and you want to be that person. You want competency. You want people to admire what you're able to do and how you're able to connect the dots on things and how smart you are. But charisma or competency, at the end of the day, they do not compensate for the lack of character. Your charisma, your competency can get you into a lot of great environments. Ultimately, it's going to be your character that keeps you there. So before you decide what you want to do this year, what changes you want to make or implement, first decide who you want to be. And what I want to do is I want to give you a real life example of someone who did this. And it's an example that quite honestly feels like a disconnect for us because we got to get into a time machine. We're going to go back 2,600 years, but I want to focus in on a guy named Daniel. 2,600 years ago, Daniel is a teenager living in the city of Jerusalem. At the time, the Babylonian Empire is large and in charge. They are an evil empire. They are constantly going into communities, into towns, into villages, and just destroying them. They're just growing their empire. And so when Daniel's a teenager living in Jerusalem, the Babylonian Empire comes in and through a series of attacks, leaves the city of Jerusalem in ruins. Homes are destroyed, the temple is destroyed, the businesses are destroyed. It's all left in ruins. And what ends up happening is the Babylonian army forcibly deports members of the royal family and priests and some of the most talented and educated and gifted individuals from the city of Jerusalem to Babylon. They didn't take everybody, but they took a huge part of the population and they deport them to Babylon. Tragic time for every single Jew. Whether you've been left behind or you've been taken to Babylon, everyone is experiencing the change brought about by crisis. And it's during this crisis that Daniel, along with several of his friends, are kidnapped, right? And they're brought from Jerusalem to Babylon and made prisoners. Now, the majority of the people deported were talented, they were gifted, but there was something very special about Daniel. There was something that made him stand out from among his peers. He was astute in management, he was talented, yes, but there was something about his character that the leaders of Babylon noticed. And so they look at this kid and they say, yes, he's got charisma, yes, he's got competency, but there's something more. And it was his character. It made him very, very unique. And here's what we read about Daniel. Daniel soon proved himself more capable than all the other administrators and high officers. Because of Daniel's great ability, the king made plans to place him over the entire empire. Now, this is a very emotional story for those living in it, because Daniel is an outsider who's forced to live in Babylon, and by God's grace, nothing really of his own other than he's a person of character and consistent, by God's grace, he's noticed by the leaders. He starts making his way up the ranks until eventually he holds his position of influence and power. And from the time he arrives, he just keeps being entrusted with more and more responsibility, and eventually Daniel is treated like a native of Babylon. It's like he's one of us. So Daniel and his friends, they love this. They're like, Daniel, way to go, man. God's blessings on you. This is great. But then there are others, specifically those from Babylon, who are jealous. They're insecure. They don't want this happening. And here's what happens next. Then the other administrators and high officers began searching for some fault in the way Daniel was handling government affairs. Now, if you like watching a good drama, this is it. Because the Babylonians who are in leadership, when they see Daniel being promoted, when they see Daniel being given position after position, they're saying, man, he's being promoted to positions that Babylonians should have. Right? He's being considered for positions that, quite honestly, the Babylonian natives should be considered for. And so these administrators and these high officers, they get together and they say, we got to dig up dirt on Daniel. We got to ensure he's no longer considered. We need a true Babylonian in there. So they call up the tabloid reporters, they call up investigative journalists, and they instruct them, after they tie their shoes, they instruct them to go find something wrong with Daniel. They say, go through his financial records, right? They say, go and try to dig up dirt through his computer history, see if you can track down a computer. Talk to his friends, see if there's a girl that he's been with, maybe a couple that he's done things that they didn't want him to do and he's forced himself out of them. Like, go find his cell phone records. If there's something wrong with Daniel, we want it. So that's the objective. These guys get together and they say, let's find a way to discredit Daniel. They came up with a plan. Some of them started demanding, we want to see his birth certificate. We want to make sure he was born here, right? Then others of them got together and they flew to Wilmington, Delaware, and they started looking for classified documents in a garage to see if they could find anything. Others of them flew to Mar-a-Lago. They started looking for classified documents there. One of them went to an old computer repair shop and found a laptop that had been left behind, see if there was any connections there. Someone else started looking through thousands of deleted emails, saying, man, is there anything here? Others spent time online, thousands of pages of documents, seeing if he'd ever gone to an island. They did whatever they could to try to discredit him. These Babylonian administrators, these high officers, they tried to find inconsistency between who Daniel appeared to be and who he really was. And here's what we read. But they couldn't find anything to criticize or condemn. He was faithful, always responsible, and completely trustworthy. I love this. They're trying to criticize someone in his life and they conclude he's consistent. Daniel's the same person no matter what environment he's in. And my guess is this is what all of us want. That when people look at us, they're like, they might be crazy, right? They might not have it all together, but I will tell you this, doesn't matter who they're with, where they're at, what they're doing. They are consistent. And you already know this, but becoming a person like that does not happen on accident. Nobody drifts into becoming the person they want to be. Just like you don't accidentally start a business, you don't accidentally lose a bunch of weight, just like you don't accidentally save a bunch of money, you do not accidentally drift into becoming the person you want to be. And I'm guessing the majority of us here today or watching online are engaging because at some level we want to follow Jesus. That doesn't happen on accident. We realize it takes some sort of intentionality. This is why Jesus, when he's surrounded by a crowd of people, tells them about following him. He says, I know you want to follow me, but don't begin until you count the cost. For who would begin construction of a building without first calculating the cost to see if there is enough money to finish it? Otherwise, you might complete only the foundation before running out of money, and then everyone would laugh at you. They would say, there's the person who started the building and couldn't afford to finish it. So Jesus says, hey, you want to follow me? Let me put it this way. You would never build a house without some planning and some intentionality. In the same way, you and I do not build a life of character on accident. We have to be intentional, and we have to consider the cost, because part of the cost of being a person of character in the world in which we live is we have to always go against the grain. And I'm not booing culture, and I'm not saying, oh, all of culture is horrific. That's not what I'm trying to communicate. I'm just saying, you know this is true. To be a person of character, you have to go against the flow. You don't have a bunch of people cheerleading. You can do it if you put your mind to it, so buckle down, do it, right? This is not happening as we're trying to be a person of character. You have to go against the flow of culture. You will not accidentally become the person you want to be. This is a teaching series on change. And during seasons of change, because there's so much unknown, so many challenges, it's so easy to be overwhelmed by emotion, and then we make decisions based on that emotion and we mess up our lives. And when it comes to Daniel's life, it's so easy to feel disconnected. Well, he lived 2,600 years ago. Daniel was not some fictional cartoon character. He was a real life person experiencing unprecedented amount of change. There is no doubt he was stressed and overwhelmed. If you're a Dolphins fan, you experienced this yesterday, right? In the midst of the changes he's experiencing, though, he found a way to be consistent. How is that possible? It's possible because he had a sincere belief in God that was impacting how he lived. And we know this because when Daniel and his friends were first brought to Babylon, they were instructed to eat certain types of food that were forbidden by Jewish law. And here's what we read. But Daniel was determined not to defile himself by eating the food and wine given to them by the king. He knew who he wanted to be. Later on, when there's a law passed, they'd been living in Babylon for a while. The pressure of the Babylonian religions and gods and goddesses are getting to them. There's a law passed that you cannot pray to or worship another god for a period of 30 days. No god, no goddess. We're going to give attention to the king. And here's what we read. But when Daniel learned that the law had been signed, he went home, knelt down as usual in his upstairs room with its windows open toward Jerusalem. He prayed 3 times a day, just as he had always done, giving thanks to his God. He was consistent. His belief in God fueled his behavior. He was able to hold on to his faith and his convictions. Now, I know this is what all of us want, but come on, what makes Daniel's story so unique is every one of us, when we're under pressure, when we're under difficulty, when we're under stress, we find ways, come on, I do this, we find ways to justify making little compromises in our character because of the pressure we're under. So I know I'm not being fully honest with the client, but I'm under so much pressure to just close this deal, I just have to not disclose everything, right? I know I should disclose some things wrong with this house, but I'm under the financial pressure right now. There's so many changes going on in my life. I'm not gonna do it. I just need to move on. I know I'm breaking my promise or a series of promises, but come on, I've got so much going on in life right now. I'm so busy, people will understand. I know I shouldn't be flirting with this person, but I'm getting ignored at home. Come on, you don't realize, I don't feel like I'm getting attention. I'm never gonna go too far with them, but it feels good right now. Most of the time, here's the deal, guys, when we compromise our character, it doesn't feel like a big deal. It really doesn't. It just feels like we can dismiss that. but little compromises add up over time. Back in June of last year, all of us were fascinated by this little vessel submersible called Titan with 5 passengers on board. Right, it had kind of descended from its mothership and headed down to Titanic wreckage. It was not the first time doing this. It had attempted like 90 times before, had successfully done it 13 times. But 90 minutes into this particular journey, it was supposed to come back up, or it had lost contact with the surface, and it was supposed to come back up later in the day at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, never surfaced. And so authorities were alerted, and they did a huge search, and most of us were glued to the news wondering what's happening, and then we learned the devastating news. It had imploded, the ship had, and all were lost. And authorities began to ask around. They tried to figure out who the experts were in this area, in the area of submersible vessels. And oddly enough, one of the experts was James Cameron, the guy who did Titanic. You wouldn't think he'd be an expert, but because of all of the research he did for the movie, he actually became an expert in these little vessels that go down and look at the Titanic. And here's what he said about the submersible, about the Titan. He says, the way composite carbon fiber materials fail at pressure is they fail over time. Each dive adds more and more microscopic damage. He continues. He says, so yes, they operated the sub safely to Titanic last year and the year before, but it was only a matter of time before it caught up with them. He says every time the submersible went underwater, it suffered a little bit of damage. And then it went under again, a little bit more damage. Went under again, a little bit more damage until it could not take it any longer. The same thing true in every arena of life, right? It's true with business. No business ends up on the news for cooking their books overnight. It's just a slow progression of poor choices that gets to that point. That's true in marriage. It doesn't just end in divorce one day. It's a slow progression of bad choices. Neglecting each other, and slowly one day we wake up and we realize we're living with a stranger. And it's easy to point fingers at other people, but we all have our own stories. Come on. Of little compromises that added up and ended in disaster. Every one of us. And we all have stories of people we love who we were on the receiving end of their decisions. The compromises started adding up and led to indifference or entitlement or bitterness or arrogance or abrasiveness, in some cases despair, and that's when we make destructive decisions. And the thing we can all admire about Daniel, right? His faith fueled his behavior. He maintained character in a horrific setting, which would have been able for any of us to just justify little compromises. He knew the story he wanted told about him at the end of his life. It was a story of consistency. This is why it's always a mistake to determine what we want to do before determining who we want to be. And the reality for all of us, we're already somebody. Right? So when people talk about you, they're already saying something. And the thing about life is every year that this life continues to evolve and change, and our reputation changes and evolves. We're evolving into somebody. Who we are is not static. So let me ask you, why not determine who you want to evolve into? If you're married, I promise you in 2024, I promise you, you are going to evolve into some sort of spouse. You'll continue to change and transform, right? It's just gonna happen. Why not to determine the kind of spouse you wanna be? If you're employed somewhere, you are gonna be evolving and changing as an employee this year. Why not determine who you wanna evolve into? You're an employer, you're gonna change and evolve as an employer. Why not determine who you're gonna evolve into? Come on, it's human beings, all of us. I promise you this year, you are gonna encounter different types of conflict. Every year we do this, right? We have conflicts with family, with friends, with coworkers, with people we thought liked us. Now we realize they don't like, there's conflict. So it's gonna happen this year, like every other year. Why not determine ahead of time who you wanna be in the midst of the conflict? Do you wanna be the person who carries around a chip on your shoulder all the time? Who always has to have the last word? Who just becomes more and more bitter? We're gonna be someone, why not determine who we're gonna be? Now, like all of you, I want to be a success, right? I wanna accomplish things. I want to accumulate things. I wanna build things, absolutely. When people talk about me, I want them to say, man, Dave's life was not wasted. He was successful in these areas. He tried to maximize the gifts, the talent. Like, I want that. Years ago, one of the best decisions that I ever made
was adopting for my life a definition of success that has been an anchor in the good season and in the bad seasons. Here's that quote. Success is when those who know me the best love and respect me the most. This has been a guiding light for my life. So it drives my decisions. And the way this happens is through consistency. And admittedly, I don't always get it right. I'm not good with consistency. No, come on. When life's going good and there's no stress, yes, I am mother freaking Teresa, right? I am like this saint. You're like, wow, Dave, look at you. You are admirable. Jesus Jr., right? But when I am under stress, when I'm overwhelmed with challenges that the changes of life brings, I start making small compromises. I'm loose with my words. I'm impatient with my family. I'm irritable. I'm not controlled by my emotions. Or I'm being controlled by my emotions. And this is why I need Jesus. I constantly fall short. I know who I should be, and I'm like in this lifelong struggle of trying to be that person. Who I want to be is the person the Apostle Paul describes when he talks about someone marked by God's Spirit. He says, when your life is marked by God's Spirit, here's the evidence of it. And he just lists out these different characters: love, joy, peace. You'll be a person of patience and kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. It's a list known as the fruit of the Spirit, because just like an apple comes from an apple tree, that fruit is what happens when we're connected to God and God is producing fruit in our life. And admittedly, when I'm stressed, when I'm overwhelmed from the change of life, I'm usually anxious, not peaceful. I'm short with people, not loving. I'm filled with fear, not joy. And so I've learned, and this is, I realize a little vague, it's the best way I can describe it. I've learned that I just need to slow down my life and try to position myself in such a way that I have this posture of humility. I make time to pray even though I don't even want to, because when I make time to pray, I'm in essence saying, God, I can't do this on my own. I can't do this on my own strength. I need you. I gather together my church family. I try to sing. I don't feel like singing. I don't feel like engaging. But I position my mind and my heart to say, God, I'm going to try to focus on your greatness, because here's what I want. Here's ultimately what I want. I want for my heart to sync with the heart of God. And I want to cooperate with what God's trying to do in me, not resist it. And so I just try to position my heart like, Lord, point out the things in me that need to change. I mean, this is why Jesus told his followers, he says, I am the vine, you are the branches. He who abides in me and I in him bears much fruit. Now, it's not fun to hear this, but fruit takes a while to grow, right? If you take a little seed for a peach and you plant it, you water it, and you plant it, there's a lot of waiting. Is it going anywhere? No. Well, it's been a week. It's been a month, been a year. Guys, it takes 3 to 4 years for peaches to begin to be produced. 3 to 4 years. Right, here's a little picture. I know you know what peaches look like, but 3 or 4 years for it to look like this. And I know you don't want to hear this. Come on. For God to produce fruit in our life often takes years. Years of pain, years of difficulty, years of challenges, and us learning to be consistent in the midst of that. It takes time. So who do you want to be? I know you have dreams. Come on. We're in one of the most driven areas of the country. I know you have ambition. I know you want to accomplish and build things and accumulate things. But what if what you want to do and accomplish is fueled by who you want to be? So bring up those words again, please. What if in your pursuit of building a great company, you said, I want to be a person who brings joy everywhere I go? What if in your pursuit of accomplishing things and accumulating things, you just had this reputation of being kind and generous? What if in chasing more and more and more, you were, no, man, that person's crazy driven, but they're also self-controlled? And maybe you hear this and it's kind of overwhelming because you're thinking, man, Dave, I already have a reputation. It is not good. And I struggle with a talk like this because people have talked about me and they do talk about me, and what they say is not what I want. I want you to know God's grace is extended to you today. In fact, I'm going to remind you of something I said last week. It's when the Jewish people were finding themselves living in exile in Babylon. Some back in the city of Jerusalem still, but many in exile. And everybody's wanting things to change. They want the city rebuilt. They want the temple rebuilt. And in the midst of that, the Jewish prophet Jeremiah writes these words. He says, the faithful love of the Lord never ends. His mercies never cease. Great is his faithfulness. His mercies begin fresh each morning. So my prayer today for you is that today's a day of new beginnings. Yeah, it might take years. It might take years, maybe decades for your reputation to change. I don't know. But I want you to know it is possible. You just have to start going in a different direction. You can't let the defeat of your current reputation keep you from changing course. This series is about change, and I want you to know you can change. At Timberlake Church, we celebrate change all the time. Right? One of the big ways that we celebrate change is through water baptism. And so I want to remind you that we have water baptism coming up in just a few weeks. In the very first week of February, we are gonna have water baptism, and we're gonna be celebrating change and new life, right? Because here's what water baptism is. When you go into the water, right, because we fully immerse here, and you know, if you're a 49ers fan, we hold you under for a while. But if we fully immerse here, and when we put you down in the water, it's like saying, just like Jesus died and was buried, my old life is dead and buried. We come up out of the water, it's like, just like Jesus was resurrected, I've been resurrected to new life. That's what we celebrate, it's change. And over the years, I've met a lot of people who say, Dave, I've been following Jesus and I've surrendered my life to him, but to be honest with you, I haven't been baptized yet, and here's why. Because I'm dropping the ball and I'm failing and I'm not even close to where I need to be. And I always say, you're never gonna be close. You think you're a few miles off from being the person God wants you to be? You're a few thousand miles off from where God wants you to be. You're never going to be. That's why you need Jesus. And so if you have never been water baptized, I encourage you to take your connection card today. For those here in person, those online, you can fill out our online connection card. You can actually, here at the Redmond campus, swing by in the lobby. We have a booth about that. But just check the box that says, hey, I'm interested in water baptism. You say, well, I need some time to think about it. That's why you just check it, and then we'll send you some information, and you can pray about it, and God will say, be water baptized. He's gonna say, if you've already surrendered, this is time. You're letting people know. And at Timberlake, here's the deal. We do not make you say anything. You literally walk into the water, and the music team's playing and singing, and so you don't have to say anything. We'll put you under, and just the very fact you're in there is your statement of, hey, I believe God has done and is doing a work in my life. So who do you wanna be? I'll end with this. None of us like to think about this, but at some point, we're all gonna die, and our lives are gonna be reduced to a single sentence. Maybe not right away, but eventually, it's a single sentence, right? When I die, my kids at some point are gonna sit around, and they're gonna be talking about me, and they're gonna say, Dad was nice, he was generous, he loved us, he worked hard. Does anybody know what's for dinner? That's it. Right, it's just a few words, and then it's like, let's move on, and I'm not exaggerating. In fact, let me put it this way. My grandmother died just over a year ago. Just amazing lady. 93 years old. This past week, I went back and reread her obituary. Now, I know you can't read it from where you're at, even online, you can't read it, I realize that. But I went back and I read her obituary, written just a couple days after she passed away, and her obituary had the same thing your obituary will have. Date of birth, date of death, who she married, when she got married, right? It had where she worked, her accomplishments. It had the names of those who preceded her in death, those who survive or are continuing to live. It also had the date, the time, and location of her funeral. That's it. 93 years of life summarized in less than 300 words. It's just so crazy to think about, because in my lifetime, I've given thousands and thousands of talks, and I've had hundreds of thousands of interactions and conversations. At some point, when I'm gone, those who knew me best and those who only had a few interactions with me, they're gonna summarize my life for me. And they're gonna say, Dave was, and then fill in the blank. It's the same is true about you. So it's always a mistake to decide what you want to do with your life before first determining who you want to be. Would you go ahead, stand with me, and I'm gonna close this in prayer. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for your goodness, your grace, your mercy. We thank you that you are a God of change and that you are constantly at work, chiseling away at our hearts, our attitudes, our thinking, our worldview. You're constantly chiseling away at us, trying to make us more and more like you. And we acknowledge, we resist that a lot. We run from it a lot. But today we reposition our hearts, we reposition our attitudes and our thinking. And we ask for you to continue doing a great work in us so that eventually you can do a work through us. May we be people of character, love and joy and peace and patience. Like, Lord, do something in us by the work of the Holy Spirit so that when our time here on earth is done, we would be known for who we were rather than what we did. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Have a great week, everybody. Love you.
Thanks for watching. But before you go, please be sure to bookmark this page so that you can find us again next week. And are you looking for a way to get engaged and join a team? The online chat engagement team is a role that anyone and everyone can do, and it's simple. Engage with people, create an environment where people are free to be themselves, and more importantly, open to receive the truth of Jesus. And if you're interested in joining this team and becoming part of what God is doing through Timberlake Online, please let me know on your connection card. Links can be found in chat, and I'll see you here next week at online.timberlakechurch.com.